Hello, I am Peter Okwocha. Welcome to Focus on Africa. Our top stories. Mozambique is battered by the most powerful cyclone ever to hit the country, with warnings that almost a year's worth of rain could fall in the next few days. Stuck in a war zone, the UN says migrants and refugees in Libya are caught up in conflict as they try to reach Europe. Sudanese protest leaders are a step closer to achieving a civilian government as they continue discussions with the country's military. Also on the program, an act of bravery hidden in history. South Africa's Isango Ensemble tells the tragic story of the SSS Mende maritime disaster.
Africa at the moment is a place that is influenced by everything outside Africa. And this story says, look within yourself. Who are you?
And in sport, Stoke City forward Sadio Berahino leads tributes to Burundi international Papi Fati, who's passed away aged 28. Thanks for joining us here on Focus on Africa from BBC World News. Officials in northern Mozambique have sent out teams to assess the damage caused by Cyclone Kenneth amid fears that hundreds of thousands of people are going to need humanitarian aid. Kenneth is the strongest recorded cyclone in Mozambique and one of the strongest ever recorded in Africa. Although it's been downgraded, there are warnings that several days of heavy rain could cause serious flooding and landslides. The worst affected areas in the region could see up to 1 meter of rain over the weekend. Our correspondent Pumza Fihlani is in the capital Maputo and has been monitoring the situation in the north. Pumza, what's the latest with Cyclone Kenneth?
Officials are still scrambling to get information on which areas have been worst affected and what sort of aid will be needed. We do know that one of the worst devastated areas currently are Kisanga, Mokamia and Ibo, and we've heard reports that in those areas people's houses have been damaged and some of them have been completely destroyed. There's also information of other infrastructure being affected. They're also looking at trying to see whether the hospitals in the area will be able to accommodate people who've been injured. It's still very early days at the moment, and much of the aid effort here is relying on people physically getting to those spaces so they can see what sort of damage has happened and how to best respond.
And they're referring to it as the strongest cyclone ever to hit these parts. Just how prepared was Mozambique just 1 month on from Cyclone Idai?
It's important to state, Peter, at this stage that this is the first time that this sort of cyclone has hit that far north in southern Africa. So for the people living in that area, they would not have been prepared for what was coming. But also the officials themselves did not see this coming. They only had about days really of advance warning, and that wasn't nearly enough for them to, one, evacuate as many people as were needed to be evacuated. They estimate that up to 600,000 people were currently living in that region, and we know that only 30,000 are currently in displacement centers. So for a lot of people, the officials themselves, it is very much now a desperate exercise to try and save time, but also to get to those people and make sure that the loss of life is avoided.
And Pumza, we've been hearing about Kenneth for about 5 days or thereabouts. Now, what about the aid agencies? How prepared are they to help those people who might be affected by in its wake?
So the aid agencies are relying at the moment on word getting out. They're relying on assessments that are being done. You will know that because they were still here in Mozambique responding to Cyclone Idai, they're hoping to take some lessons from that relief effort. But we know that there's a severe shortage of funds, is what they've said. They've said they don't have nearly enough funds to respond to die, and let alone funds to respond to this crisis. So over the next few days, I anticipate that there will be massive drives to try and drum up support to receive aid and bring in some much needed support here, not just from the region, but from the international community.
Pumza Fishlani speaking to us live there from Maputo. Thank you very much. Let's take a quick look now at other stories making the headlines across Africa. Tens of thousands of protesters demanding the departure of Algeria's ruling elite rallied peacefully in Algiers for a 10th consecutive day today. President Abdelaziz Bouteflika stepped down after 20 years in power this month, bowing to pressure from the military and weeks of demonstrations, mainly by young people seeking change. Voters in the Republic of Benin will head to the polls on Sunday in what's been described as the country's most controversial election in decades. The Electoral Commission blocked 5 opposition parties on a technicality. The 2 parties that met the criteria are loyal to President Talon, who's been in power since 2016. And what's believed to be the second largest uncut diamond ever discovered has been found in a mine in Botswana. The stone is the size of a tennis ball, but it's not as valuable as some smaller diamonds of higher quality. The biggest find of more than 3,000 carats was dug up in South Africa in 1905. Migrants and refugees in Libya are facing yet another challenge in their treacherous quest to reach Europe from Africa. And that's according to the UN Refugee Agency. Fierce fighting has flared up near the Libyan capital Tripoli between pro-government forces and fighters from the east of the country. The UN is expressing increasing concern about their safety. The BBC's Ola Guerin has visited detainee camps near the front line, and a warning: you might find some of the material in this report distressing.
A hail of bullets and a terrifying ordeal. This unverified mobile phone footage, obtained by the BBC, appears to show migrants and refugees under attack in a detention centre on the outskirts of Tripoli. The government here has blamed militia loyal to General Khalifa Haftar, a commander from the east who is trying to take the capital. These detainees have now been moved to a safer location. But others have not. We found hundreds of defenceless civilians in a detention centre in the suburbs of Tajura, dangerously close to the front line. Europe doesn't want them, and Libya can't protect them. Well, conditions here are extremely basic. The men tell us they're facing every kind of problem. They don't have enough food, they don't have enough water. But the biggest issue now is safety. The fighting is very nearby. We've been able to hear it ourselves, just a mile or 2 away. Michael is a former medical student from South Sudan. Like many here, he says he's living in fear.
Actually, no one's live here. Every time we hear bomb, we hear gunshot every time. Every day, even the night, we cannot sleep at all.
You feel your lives are not safe here?
Of course. Because I'm still facing the same problem that I was facing in South Sudan. I escaped because of the war, and today I am in a war zone.
The United Nations says more than 8,000 migrants and refugees are in detention centres near front lines and should be moved to safety. Instead, Ahmed says the international community has abandoned people like him in the line of fire.
We don't see any move for us. So actually we feel that we are forgotten here. And it's hard to feel that you can't do anything, just waiting until the sound of bomb pass. And you find yourself, and after that I found myself alive. It's good. So it's not hit us.
Not this time?
Yeah, not this time.
For 3 weeks now, fighting has raged nearby, bearing down on the young. When there is shooting, Hawa tells me, we hear it in our hearts. The children cry, afraid the bullets will kill them. Many here dreamt of finding a better future for themselves and their children. Instead, they are now trapped in someone else's war. Orla Guerin, BBC News, Tripoli.
Protest leaders in Sudan have told the BBC they are close to reaching an agreement with the country's military to hand over power to a civilian government. The country has experienced a political crisis since a coup early this month, which deposed Omar el-Bashir after 3 decades in power. Catherine Biaruhanga reports from Khartoum.
In some ways, Sudan's protests have been a leap of faith. People here are proud of the fact that this has been a months-long peaceful movement. Friday prayers offer a moment to focus minds, a chance to repeat their refrain. Civilian rule is what they want and nothing else will do.
We want a state that will give all Sudanese people their rights. It must be a peaceful state and a tolerant state.
Importantly, the military rulers and the protest leaders are talking once again. Both sides appear optimistic at the moment. They say some progress has been made in terms of what a future civilian transitional government will look like. But there are key sticking points. For example, who will be the leaders of this future government? Will it take 2 or 4 years for Sudan to hold democratic elections? And quite crucially, how much power are the generals really willing to give up? Will civilians be able to oversee the security forces? For the moment, there's a real sense of euphoria and excitement here, faith and hope for the future. But people here know that their struggle is not yet over. Catherine Biaruhanga, BBC News, Khartoum.
This is BBC Focus on Africa from BBC World News with me, Peter Okoche. Still to come on the program, Mimi with the sports. Caster Semenya gets backing from a fellow South African Olympic gold medalist. And the moves go global. The Afrobeats dance classes shaking up London. I'm Peter Okoche. The top stories this hour. Mozambique has been battered by the most powerful cyclone ever to hit the country, with warnings that almost a year's worth of rain could fall in the next few days. And Sudanese protest leaders are a step closer to achieving a civilian government as they continue discussions with the country's military. Hundreds of black South African men who died at sea in support of the British Army are being remembered through a theatre production in London. During the First World War, more than 800 men from the South African Native Labour Corps set sail on the SS Mende warship in the Western Front. BBC Africa's Celestina Olulode went to meet the award-winning South African theatre company, telling their story.
On a journey to help in a war that wasn't theirs to fight. An act of bravery hidden in history. This is the Isango Ensemble's moving tribute to South African victims who were largely forgotten at sea. On the 21st of February 1917, the SS Mende warship sank just off the English coast. But this was no act of war. In thick fog, the SS Daro, a cargo ship, ploughed full speed into the Mende and did nothing to help its victims. 646 men lost their lives as the SS Mende sank. They were part of the South African Native Labour Corps, a group of volunteers who signed up to support the British Army. Many did so in the hope that they would win more political freedoms back home. But in apartheid South Africa and beyond, many were unaware of their story.
It's part of our history. Unfortunately, it's something that we didn't know and that it was not taught in schools as part of history. So when we started the story, reading the book, it was a total shock. I believe that the government has to take responsibility for the young people to know what actually happened.
A colourful score drawn from music of different African traditions, the performance is based on a book by Fred Khumalo called Dancing the Death Drill. The title of the novel comes from an unconfirmed but persistent anecdote about a pastor on the ship who led the men into a barefoot dance. Myth or truth, it's this imagery that captures the bravery of those on board. And even today, for some South Africans, performing this dance is like looking death straight in the face and confronting it head-on. And the story also explores African identity.
These were African men who were unapologetically African men. Africa at the moment is a place that is influenced by everything outside Africa. And this story says, look within yourself. Who are you? You know, before you start going outside, do you know who you are?
With a desire to keep the memory of the men alive, the ensemble hopes to take the story to other parts of the continent.
So we are going to fight with our words and music. Turn our words into bullets. This dance is our history, our story.
Celestina Olulode, BBC News.
Brilliant stuff. You're watching BBC Focus on Africa. It's now time for some sports. Mimi, football, I guess.
Indeed, but some sad news, unfortunately. Tributes have been pouring in for Burundi international Papi Fati, who died of a suspected heart failure during a match for his local club Melanti Chiefs in Eswatini on Thursday. He was taken to hospital where he was later pronounced dead. He was just 28 years old. Fati made 28 appearances for Burundi and was part of the squad that qualified for his country for their very first Africa Cup of Nations, which kicks off this summer. His compatriot Saido Berahino, who plays for Stoke City, wrote on his social media page today, "I still can't believe it. It was an honor to play with you for Burundi and also qualifying for the first time ever. History was made. You will never be forgotten. Rest in peace." Burundi Football Federation have also given their condolences. His uncle and former professional coach in Burundi have been reacting to his passing.
Right now I am very sad because he was like my child. It was me who took care of him from childhood. He was born here in Kinama at his father's house. I am his uncle. I often helped his father.
He passed away on the pitch, unfortunately. It's really sad for me, for the whole country. We had just seen him back in the national team for a while when he wasn't called up, so it's painful for everyone.
And moving on, Morocco's Wydad Casablanca will host Mamelodi Sundowns in the first leg of their African Champions League semi-final, which kicks off shortly. Both sides are familiar with each other, having met in the group stage of the competition, with Sundowns winning the first game 2-1. But Wydad won the return 1-0. Sundowns coach Pitso Mosimane is optimistic that his side can progress to the final.
Waiting for opportunity to go to the water. In South Africa, there we are strong. There we can determine our fate, we can determine our direction. So we hope that we can change the fortunes. Why I believe that we can do something different is because the 3 times we've played work, we have always finished here.
To the English Premier League, Liverpool have a chance today to go back to the top. Manchester City went 1 point above in the table after the win over United in midweek. But kicking off shortly, Liverpool will host bottom of the table Huddersfield. City will play Burnley over the weekend. In athletics, the double Olympic champion at 800 meters, Caster Semenya, cruised to victory in the 5,000 meters at the South African Championships. Semenya could move up to the distance as she awaits a decision of the Court of Arbitration for Sport in an appeal against regulations seeking to limit her testosterone levels. The IAAF wants female athletes with differences in sexual development to reduce their blood testosterone level to below a stipulated concentration for a period of 6 months before they can compete, saying they have an unfair advantage. But this is limited to events ranging between 400 meters and a mile. Semenya has received support from her South African teammate and 400 meters Olympic champion Wade van Niekerk.
for women in a whole. She's fighting for something beyond just track and field. She's fighting for women in sports, in society, and I respect her for that. I mean, I support her, and I mean, with the hard work and talents that she's been putting in the sport and what she believes in and what she's dreaming for, I've got a lot of respect for her, and I really hope and pray that everything just goes from strength to strength for her.
And as for Nijkerk, he has pulled out of the South African Athletics Senior Championships. He cited the weather conditions as it had been wet and he didn't want to take any chances. Nijkerk has been sidelined for 18 months due to a knee injury. And that's all the sport, Peter.
Many thanks, Mimi. Thank you very much. Now, it all started in Nigeria, but now the sound and the moves of Afrobeats are popular all around the world. But how many of you know your shaku shaku from your azonto? We sent our reporter Mariama Wuriye to a class in London where students say they are learning more about the continent than just dance moves.
This may look like a dance class in Lagos or Accra, but we are actually in London. There are over 50 Afrobeats dance classes in this city alone, and the hardwood floors are overflowing with people from all different backgrounds and walks of life.
The polyrhythm Afrobeats is really empowering and infectious, and it just makes everyone want to come to class and just forget about their struggles in a day, move their hips and move their body basically.
Though these classes are now popular in London, students say this wasn't always the case.
So growing up, I feel like it was more just classical ballet, and then there was hip hop and maybe jazz. I feel like as today, the modern day Afrobeats, it's just kind of risen and it's more known everywhere. I don't really know why that is, but it's nice to have a different change in the community.
It's not just dance moves that are being shared here. Students from all over the globe say they get to mix and mingle while gaining knowledge about the continent as a whole.
I do consider myself a cultural ambassador for Nigerian dances. It's where I was brought up. Whether I'm teaching in here, Russia, France, I believe that the knowledge that I'm spreading is reaching the masses, and people want to know more about our style and how we dance.
I believe that Afrobeats is for everyone, and my kids, they integrate with everybody that's in the class, whether white, black, brown, or whatever the case may be. So yeah, they dance with a lot of people from different origins and different backgrounds.
With all the Afrobeats madness sweeping London, I've decided to learn a few moves.
The Akwaba. Shake your hands, then up. Shake your hands.
Mariama Wuriye, BBC News London. I love it. Thank you.
I wonder if they've got any classes for geriatrics like me. Just before we go, let's take another look at our top story. Officials in northern Mozambique have sent out teams to assess the damage caused by Cyclone Kenneth amid fears that hundreds of thousands of people are going to need humanitarian aid. Just last month, another cyclone left hundreds of thousands of Mozambicans homeless. The World Meteorological Organization says it is unprecedented for two tropical cyclones of such intensity to have struck the country in the same season. Although there has been less destruction of property this time, there are fears of floods and landslides which could destroy crops. Now, don't forget you can get in touch with me and some of the team on Twitter. I am at Okwoche. But from me, Peter Okwoche, and the rest of the Focus on Africa team, have a great weekend and see you soon.